Hello and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and to blatantly rip off the Truman Show, good night, wherever it is that you are. I am JT Viper. Most of you will know me. If you're just tuning in for the very first time, hello and thank you for visiting my channel. Tonight's stream, I suppose it's technically this morning's stream as it's 2 a.m. here, will be a stream of consciousness affair for the most part. And one that I think I need, because I have been trying to get my thoughts on the whole Parliamentary Motion M103 situation out into video format for quite some time. Now, yes, this has been covered by content creators and public figures much more notable than myself, many with much more of a book learning than myself. But, as I think is every Canadian's duty, I have worked to inform myself on the issue, and I'm now looking to inform others, or at the very least, direct others to resources which they can use to inform themselves. Yes, I am saying to educate yourself, shitlord. I'm gonna monkey around with my little setup here for a moment. I do want to try to get my screen set up properly for when I go full screen. Apologies for the shifting around. I've had some problems getting this started up beforehand. All right, so that seems to be, there we go. Now, for some reason, my web browser doesn't want to show up here. No matter what I do. Nah, it ain't gonna show. So I'm gonna get rid of that. I'll try this one more time, because I'd like to show you guys the actual text of Parliamentary Motion M103 so that we can all get a better idea of what's going on. Billy's here. Billy, say hello to the people. No, you want pets? Okay, well, Billy's not going to say hello right now, then. Let's see. Put in Google Chrome. I had to start using Chrome now. Uh-huh. Alrighty, then. Doesn't seem to want to work. I have no idea why I can't seem to get this to function. That's unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. Alright, well, fuck that. That's just going to have to deal with it for now. I guess everyone's going to have to suffer through me reading it. I suppose I can just put, I'll just put the links to the description, or links to the pertinent links. Pertinent links there in the description of the video. That might help. For some reason, Google Chrome is not wanting to show on my OBS, so figure that out at some other time. Billy, we have discussed this, mister. You cannot be playing with paper bags right now. Yeah, I know, you're adorable, but that's done. Now's not the time. The hordes of people listening cannot stand to hear you bat around a paper bag, as cute as you are. Alright, so with that out of the way, the first link that I have there in the description is and will be my link to the official Parliament of Canada, Members of Parliament, and Private Members' Motions current session filtered results for Iqra Khalid, Mississauga MP, and this will be Motion M103. Now, I've done some legislation analysis videos in the past, and one of the things that I have always enjoyed about looking at different pieces of legislation is that, well, laws are written in such a way with their sections and subsections as to make them very clear, very concise. Some might even say clear, concise, and succinct in nature. However, this is not one of those times. So I'll read you what the motion says, start to finish. For the life of me, I cannot figure out why the hell it's not showing up on my OBS. But I guess I'm just going to have to put up with that. So, the motion states that, quote, that in the opinion of the House, and this would be phrased as, it is motioned, or I would motion that the member would put this forward, that in the opinion of the House, the government should, A, recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear, B, condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and take note of House of Commons' petition E411 and the issues raised by it, and C, request that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a study on how the government could, 1, develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism. My cat is getting to the wires. I'm sorry, folks. Get out of here, Bill. Fucking pets. All right. 1, develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada, while ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policymaking. 2, collect data to contextualize hate crime reports and to conduct needs assessments for impacted communities, and that the government should present its findings and recommendations to the House no later than 240 calendar days from the adoption of this motion, provided that in its report, the committee should make recommendations that the government may use to better reflect the enshrined rights and freedoms in the Constitution Acts, including the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That is the start to finish text of Motion M103. Doesn't seem like much, except it's a bloody word salad to deal with. Doesn't seem all too important, and a lot's been said about the claimed importance or lack thereof of this motion. So I think that'll be something I'll have to touch on as well. But there were a few things that I wanted to bring up about this motion just off the start, just off the hop. And that there are a few key points that, or at least key phrases and terms that are brought up. And those would be, going 1 through, I think I have about 5 of them listed here. Correct that, many more than 5. So you have Islamophobia, something that has been the focus of this entire motion. Again, I apologize for the visual lacking podcast style format here. I don't know what the fuck is going on with my technology, but it's been a long day, so I can't be fucked to try and figure it out. What I can say is this, is that Islamophobia has a significance in this motion in that it is not defined. And some would say, well, if it's not defined, then can't you just disregard it? But no, in the case of Canadian law, now again, this is not a law, this is not a bill, and I'll have to try and backtrack onto that because so much of the information that you'll need in order to actually understand what's going on here takes some proper reading. So before that, I guess I should, and I will put forward what a bill and a motion are different in, how it is that they differ from one another. And the simple facts are this. A bill, if passed by the House of Commons, and then passed by the Senate, and then if it receives royal assent, which is from in this case, Governor General of Canada, not in this case, but in the case we're speaking of a House of Commons bill, it would receive royal assent to be passed down into law, and therefore, at that point, there are punishments and that go with it, and it's, a very formal matter. A motion can do one of 3 things. Again, this comes from the Parliament of Canada. 1, it can call upon the House of Commons to voice an opinion as a government. Number 1. 2, call upon the House of Commons to have something done. So to ask the House of Commons to ask someone else to do something. Or 3, call upon the House of Commons to do something directly. Now, of course, this is always phrased as a request in the motion, but here's the thing, it is phrased as a request in the motion, but if the motion then passes, it follows that the government will then have to make good on the request that it has approved. Now, a vote is always taken. Of course, there's debate and there's vote on motions as well as bills. And if people don't want to approve it, they can say nay. The ayes, the nays. And all of this has been done. This has already been passed. I actually wrote my MP for my riding, Neil Ellis. I wrote him a 3-page handwritten letter, 0 typos, scripted it all out prior to, edited it, and put it through to him. Took the time in hoping that if somebody really took the time to write out a letter, all the revisions that would be needed to just do it by hand, put a lot of personal inflection to it, put a certain level of humanity into it, that he might take note of that. Well, I haven't received any response or acknowledgement from my MP. And of course, my MP was one of the Liberals, all the Liberal Party MPs in the House of Commons who voted in favor of Motion 103. But anyway, a motion can call upon the House of Commons to do something, to have something done, or to voice an opinion. And this motion has, well, a little bit of all three. Kind of touches all 3 points. If you break this down into segments, you get the first part. Well, it is calling for the House of Commons to, quote, recognize the need to quell the increasing public climate of hate and fear. It doesn't specify what that fear is about. It doesn't specify what the hatred is about. It just says hate and fear. Well, I suppose it's left to everyone to interpret this, but since it is a systemic racism and religious discrimination motion, I believe that had Islamophobia there when it started. I was watching this last week, and I believe the site mentioned Islamophobia, systemic racism, and religious discrimination, but I'll let that slide for now. There is something very, very unsettling in the government agreeing, our House of Commons, our House of Representatives, essentially, those whom we elect to represent us on a national scale, agreeing in majority, at least the majority of conservative MPs had sense enough to vote in opposition to this. But the Green, the NDP, and the Liberals, all whom voted in favor, some abstained. Anyway, it is very unsettling to me that my government apparently feels that there is a need to doctor public sentiment, to act in such a way as to, hope in their hopes, change the way that the public thinks. That is not their job. It is not the job of those who I elect and those that my fellow Canadians elect to then turn around and tell Canadians what they're supposed to think. If for any reason, Mr. Ellis, you are watching this because your name was tagged and, I don't know, some CSIS spook has decided to forward this on, I would inform you that you are not a mouthpiece of your own opinions at this point. You are a mouthpiece of the opinions of your constituents. You were not elected to your position to tell us what our opinions are. You were not elected. Okay, people did not come together and vote you into office to then have you tell them what they think. Your job is to listen to your constituents and voice the opinions and concerns of those whom you govern on the behalf of to those whom you govern with. That is my first concern here, and I will sum this all up at the end as well, but I do have a larger concern about this whole issue. The second segment, I guess subsection B of the motion, though it doesn't formally give itself sections, it calls upon the House to condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. Condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, and take note of House of Commons' petition E411 and the issues raised by it. All right, well, let's let's unpack that for a moment. Islamophobia. Well, if we look to the most common options, we will see things like, oh, I don't know. Let's just go to Islamophobia definition and see what the spread out is on these. Well, Google brings it to us with dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. There's one. If we go to the Oxford English Dictionaries, dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. Okay. There's another one. Let's see what Merriam-Webster thinks. Webster, Islamophobia. And Merriam-Webster Dictionary since 1828 says irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam. Islamophobe, Islamophobic. Personally, I would like to go with, out of all of these, the Merriam-Webster option. I wish. The irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam, that could just say Muslims. Because then the government would not be condemning the simple dislike of a religion. My government, my members of parliament, have made it clear to me that they hold, and again, this is not, I don't believe they are representing their constituent opinions here. They're calling upon the House to recognize these things. Not agreeing that Canada, if you'll notice in the motion, they're not agreeing that Canada has these feelings. They are agreeing amongst themselves to condemn these things. My government now, officially condemns Islamophobia. It also apparently condemns religious discrimination. Religious discrimination and systemic racism, whatever that may be. And hello fucker to you too, subconscious devil. The funny thing is that and I'm going to put a second one in here, second link in the description. Second link. How does private members' business work? Well, this is about bills and motions. It does say here that when tabling a motion, I will find this here. I had it highlighted earlier. Yes. A motion expressing a resolution is usually worded as follows, that, in the opinion of the House, the government should. And it says, followed by a clear and succinct statement of the course of action the member wishes to see adopted. Motions may propose the expenditure of public funds, provided that they do so in terms which only suggest the course of action to the government without ordering or requiring it. Again, you can't motion in Parliament that I demand this be done. You can say, I request that this be done, and the government can then agree yay or nay whether or not they want to do that thing. But you can rest assured that since the government has passed this, they've said aye to it, that which has been requested in it will be done. No, that it is not turning into a law. It is no more illegal now to criticize Islam than it was before under our existing religious libel laws. But it is concerning in that apparently our government thinks that the dislike or hatred, I can understand hatred, like out and out hatred of Muslims, and that would be wrong. And to just dislike Muslims on the basis of them being Muslim, well, you're within your rights to do so. I don't think it's a great way to work it. But it's not the place of the government to make these statements, to make these giant virtue signaling statements. It's almost as if Sweden and Canada are in an ongoing competition as to who can cuck themselves the hardest. Drinking some chocolate milk here. I'm not sure if it's white supremacist to drink chocolate milk. Is it, someone tell me, is it just the white milk that's white supremacist, or Or is it even worse since I'm just consuming, I'm a white colonialist consuming all that is of color. Who knows and who really gives a fuck? But moving on. We have Islamophobia, not defined. And it's odd. I don't know. Oh, I'd have to activate Nightbot. I apologize, Subconscious Devil. Sorry, Subby. So what happens here? What happens now? We have Islamophobia, which has not been defined. And yet we're supposed to be looking for, well, what does it all mean? What does it mean now that this is there? Well, the question becomes, obviously, how are we defining Islamophobia? And the way we would look at that, if we were to make any sort of official or legal decision, when something is left undefined, or when something is uncertain in Canadian law, which is based off of the system of British common law, which is less about very, very strict documentation and more about setting precedent from case to case, well, we have the principle of what's known as the reasonable individual. A charge may stand or be dropped based on, I guess should stand or be defeated, based on whether or not a reasonable individual would believe something to be the case. So, for an example, in the case of tort law, where someone has, let's say there's been road rage incident, you've bumped somebody on the freeway, traffic's really bad and everyone's backed up and, they roll back a bit, you move forward a bit and boom, there's a little bit of a bump. And that person gets out of their vehicle, comes at you, and on their way walking towards you says, I'm going to kick your ass. Well, the court would then ask, well, would a reasonable individual think that the person being threatened ought to have feared for their safety? If the answer is a yes, well then, based on all the evidence, if the answer is a yes, then, well, yeah, the person can be convicted for, I believe it's assault, actually. It's assault here if you're uttering threats and to act in a threatening way without causing physical harm being battery. So, if we're to work with a definition and something is left undefined, we have to go to what a reasonable individual would view as a definition. And in this case, a reasonable individual might look to a source, an official source like the Oxford English Dictionary or the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, or just to Google, who knows? I don't know if our Supreme Court is in the habit of listening to the almighty Google just yet. But again, I stress, this is not a bill, this is a motion, this will not become a legal case anytime soon. But we do know is that both Ikra Khalid and the Heritage Minister, Melanie Joly, both of whom have championed this motion, neither one of them will provide an official on-the-record definition as by what the motion M103, means when it says Islamophobia. It won't say, they won't specify, oh, this is what we mean by it. This is what it means. Well, because then they could say, well, could you revise the motion to please define that better? And they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that, and I wouldn't want to presume to speak for them and why they refuse to define their terms. But there are only a couple of reasons that come to my mind. Really, there's only one. If you refuse to, I guess there's only two reasons. If you refuse to justify your terms, so let's just say you don't justify or define your terms, then it's one of two things. One, you are incapable of defining your terms, and then in that case, if you are incapable of understanding your own motion, it should be tossed. Or second, you are capable of defining your terms, you are capable of providing people the definition with which you are working, but you are choosing not to. Now, why would somebody want to leave something undefined? We've covered the, well, what if they can't? But what if they can and they choose not to? Well, the only reason I could see for leaving something intentionally vague is to allow for that thing, that term, to encompass more meanings than you might otherwise prescribe to it. You might not want to say that it's restricted to this, this, and this, because you might want to expand it to include other things. Have a good one, Subby. Basically, I'm trying to explain M103 here and why it's important that things aren't being defined. But sleep well and do try to avoid a hangover. Anyway, it's my personal opinion, and of course I can't prove it, that the MPs that are all gung-ho about this are leaving it purposefully vague as to allow for it to encompass more things as they go forward. Because make no mistake, this will be the first of many steps towards enshrining protection. I'm not even drinking and I'm slurring my words here. To enshrining certain protections for Muslims, Islam, you name it. Now, I actually, guess to kind of go backwards a bit here, I spoke to my member of parliament when he was just a candidate for the riding. This is some time ago, and there were some remarks that were made based on, and I'm going to look for my God dang it, I had a thing here from the Canadian Human Rights Commission. But I suppose I'll define that later. I asked Neil Ellis, Neil, I asked him for a number of things. One was about replacing our electoral system. The second was in making Statistics Canada independent. And where was the one I had here? Banning partisan government ads. I like that one. Senate reform. Diversity. And here was my question that I had for Neil. I asked him because, of course, there was the 50-50, it's 2015, if everyone remembers this from good old loony Trudeau. He had his it's 2015 50-50 gender cabinet thing. And I said, diversity. Neil, do you really believe that quotas are the way to run a nation? Honestly, my question here is extremely simple. And he said, women represent over 51% of the Canadian population, and yet historically have been underrepresented in election after election. In keeping with our devotion to the principle of universal equality, the Liberal Party of Canada will continue to actively promote women's political participation. The United Nations provides a 33% guideline critical mass for countries. Hello, Billy. Billy's come up here to snuggle. For countries electing women, where the percentage of women elected will have an impact on the policies, direction, and functioning of society. This is an issue of democratic representation, and we are not there yet. Okay. And so, this was all very clearly cut and pasted. Because the text of the... Billy, don't attack my mic. The text of the email, the font size changes, the font type changes. Anyway, he said, since you asked my campaign office, and I did ask him that basically if you are bringing people on to work for you or volunteer for you in your campaign office, are you bringing them on based on their merits or based on their junk? Again, this is to give a, come on, Billy, down. There we go. An idea of what my personal MP thinks about, diversity. Since you asked about my campaign office, for your information, the people working on my campaign are volunteers. They spend many hours helping my campaign, and I value them all. That's very nice, Neil, but I didn't ask you that. Their skills, aptitudes, attitudes, and willingness to learn are all demonstrated to me daily. And they are the basis of respect and engagement, regardless of gender. Okay. My experience is that people hire on skill set and fire on personality. I believe best practices are to hire on personality and train the skill set. Sincerely, Neil Ellis, Liberal candidate, Bay of Quinte riding. Now I find that a little interesting, that for some reason, Neil wants to focus more on who you are than what you know. That just irks me a little. Anyway, back to the important thing that we were talking about. And again, if you're a Canadian and you're listening to this, I would encourage you, whatever your stance is on Motion M103 or anything at all, to take a look at how your MPs are voting and ask yourself, are they voting in a way that you would like them to? Are they being representative of your opinions, your positions? So, we move on to, systemic racism. Again, undefined. So again, we are forced to go to Merriam-Webster and the rest. Let's say systemic racism. Well, that doesn't seem to be available to Merriam-Webster. How about Oxford? Systemic racism, Oh, we get institutional racism, but that's not the term we're getting here. Systemic racism. Well, systemic racism, a theory of oppression. Oxford journals. But that's all just theory. Well, let's ask what systemic means. Relating to a system, especially as opposed to a particular part. And 2, denoting the part of a circulatory system. Well, fuck that. Nothing to do with the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. I think we all understand what's going on here with the systemic racism. This is the racism equals power plus privilege school of English. Not the racism equals being prejudiced based on race school of rational English. And of course, then we come to, but again, undefined, left intentionally vague. And when asked to define these things, the members of Parliament involved, decline. They dodge things. And if you would all tune your eyes to Logic's most recent video on this, the extents, the lengths to which Iqra Khalid will go to try and dodge answering any questions about defining anything in this motion are sickening. If the press asks you a straightforward question to define something in your motion, you should be able to do so. This has been going around for weeks. You should be able to handle this. Even if you're going to lie to me, you should have an answer prepared. The next option we have here is religious discrimination. Well, we have a religious, blasphemous libel law in the books, which is apparently under review, but if you ask me, that's probably just a bunch of hot air. But hey, I don't trust my politicians to do shit all that they promise to do. There's that. Logic has hell aids. Well, Logic is allowed to have hell aids, as long as it isn't given to me. That's all I ask. Next up, we have 3 requests that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a study on how the government could 1. So they're asking for a study to be undertaken. Again, if it's approved, then the study will be requested. If it's not, then the study won't. Well, it was approved, so it looks like we're getting that study. First, the study has to develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada, while ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policymaking. Well, we get our systemic racism again. So the government is basically looking into now how to change the minds of the people. I don't want to get too conspiracy theorist here, but that doesn't sound nice to me. I don't like the way that rolls off the tongue. Studying how the government could develop a whole-of-government approach to reducing or eliminating systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada. Not just eliminating these things within the government. All right? If the MPs were all saying, how about we all just try and, not be prejudiced against a certain group, I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But my government says, yeah, let's convene a study. Let's spend taxpayer dollars trying to figure out how to change the way the taxpayers think. Something feels wrong there. Something feels off. To know that my government is spending my tax dollars trying to figure out how to make me think what they want me to think. As previously stated, that's not their job. But they're making it their job with these kinds of motions. And then we have some people will probably go off on holistic, as in like holistic medicine. Like Sargon says, systemic racism in Canada. Yes. I like Sargon's take on this. It was quite a chuckle. Yeah, one of the most multicultural, quote unquote, nations in the entire world, and we have the systemic racism problem. Yeah, it's not like Muslims here have been committing honor killings at all. Not like that's been a problem. Not like there are at least 6 victims that I can think of off the top of my head of Islamic honor killings in my province alone. Nope. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. So that's that. That's the holistic simply means basically taking a very detailed and comprehensive approach. Just to anyone who's, as I am, a fan of Jeff Holiday and who will hear holistic as like holistic medicine. Oh God, no. Pseudoscience. No. There's nothing to do with naturopaths in this. It's literally just a comprehensive, all angles considered sort of thing. And then it says, ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policymaking. Well, if it's actually evidence-based, I'd love to see it. Because from all the numbers I've seen, Muslims are one of the minority of hate crime victims in Canada. Yes, everyone. There was the shooting at the Quebec City Mosque where Alexandre Bissonnette killed, I think it was either 5 or 6 people. And that's horrible. It is absolutely deplorable. And nobody, I don't think anyone in their right mind supports that. I don't think anybody in Canada is like, yeah, that's absolutely awesome. Like, that's exactly what we need in the world. No. So I don't think there's an issue there. But anyway, moving on. Number 2. Collect data to contextualize hate crime reports. Okay. And to conduct needs assessments for impacted communities. Well, this can be a number of things. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms has an interesting way of looking at the concept of a hate crime. There's a reason why hate crime legislation exists, and there's a part in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that allows for it to work. I'm going to bring up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms PDF text, because there is a point in this. I'll bring up here we go. The byline. That was the byline. If by byline you mean the secondary line to a headline in a news article, I'm not sure. But when we're referring to something like why hate crimes are allowed to exist, like where the actual concept of a hate crime comes from, we actually need to go down to, and if I scroll to here, section 15.2, affirmative action programs. Because it's funny that section 15.1 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states, and I quote section 15.1, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination and, in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability. That actually hasn't been amended yet to include gender identity, which is supposed to be there now. After that last vote, I'm not gonna complain that they haven't updated it yet. But if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna say you're gonna do something, at least do it. If you're gonna waste my taxpayer dollars on something, at least do it, so I can say, look, this is what they've done. But there's a funny little thing called subsection 2, which states, subsection 1 does not preclude any law, program, or activity that has as its object, the amelioration of conditions of disadvantaged individuals or groups, including those that are disadvantaged because of race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Now, I'm going to try to find, and I'm not sure which of my emails it's under, but I did speak with, I emailed with, I emailed the Human Rights Commission, which was kind of fun. And wouldn't you know it, they had a definition for what all these things meant. What a historically disadvantaged group was, and I'm pretty sure it was in my .ca email. We'll find that just now. And if you can stick by me for 5 seconds here, I'll have it up for you. And all right, abracadabra, alakazam. Now, reminders, info.com. Here we go. Human rights, disadvantaged individuals and groups, definitions. They sent me one hell of a fucking thing. Dear Joshua, we thank you for your inquiry to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is one part of the Canadian Constitution. The Charter sets out those rights and freedoms that Canadians believe are necessary in a free and democratic society. Now, this is funny because they don't do their emails well, because the text, again, the type font and the font size changes. So they're quoting from something, and they don't tell me what they're quoting from, but it says, neither of these acts provide a definition of disadvantaged groups. They both rather address disadvantages based on different grounds of discrimination. The purpose of both acts, may follow the principle that disadvantage, that's in quotations, may be generally understood as the presence of barriers to accessing tools needed for self-sufficiency. Disadvantage may occur when people are denied access to and use of the same tools found useful by the majority of society. These tools may include, but are not limited to, autonomy, dignity is apparently a tool, the support of the community, access to health, education, and responsive support systems, access to justice and information, access to employment and capital. Overcoming disadvantage would mean overcoming or removing barriers to self-sufficiency. In that spirit, both acts work to ensure equal access to employment and the provision of services which are necessary to self-sufficiency by removing barriers and taking special measures to protect against disadvantages based on prohibited grounds of discrimination. Back to the proper type font size. In an employment equity context, again, this is not employment equality, this is employment equity. They don't want the equality of opportunity, they want the equity of outcome. We can talk about designated groups who are historically disadvantaged. There are 4. So here we go. This is from info.com at chrc-ccdp.gc.ca. They get a name, sincerely info.com. That's lovely. There are 4 groups that are considered to be historically disadvantaged in Canada. Those are women, visible minorities, people with disabilities, and Aboriginal peoples. Now, I don't see why it is that Aboriginal peoples are not visible minority, because they are in Canada, but anyway, we'll move on here. The Employment Equity Act, quote, the act helps ensure that all Canadians have the same access to the labor market. So, I'm going to just do a quick look. Yeah, nothing else there. Yeah, in a human rights context, the Canadian Human Rights Act does not offer a definition of or specification of a disadvantaged group. Rather, the Act offers protection to individuals and groups of individuals by prohibiting discrimination based on several different grounds. The purpose of the Act is, quote, to extend the laws in Canada to give effect, within the purview of matters coming within the legislative authority of Parliament, to the principle that all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make for themselves the lives that they are able and wish to have, and to have their needs accommodated, consistent with their duties and obligations as members of society, without being hindered in or prevented from doing so by discriminatory practices based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, family status, disability, or conviction for an offense for which a pardon has been granted, or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. 4 groups as far as it goes for any defined thing in Canada. That is our women, visible minorities, people with disabilities, and Aboriginal peoples. Well, why is it that we can have this subsection 2 still? I understand the concept for affirmative action, but the fact is that section 2, and again, the reason I bring up this whole bit about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is that it is mentioned specifically. It is mentioned specifically in Motion M103, and I believe in E411, the petition that mentions as well. They say they want to say, oh, it's a bit of word shifting, a little bit of sleight of hand. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Bit of sleight of hand when they say the government may use to better reflect the enshrined rights and freedoms in the Constitution Acts, including the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They include that so that it might sound better. It looks better on paper. Oh, we're mentioning the equalities. Yes, that's great. Wonderful. Except that document they're referencing explicitly allows for laws and general treatment as long as it can be said, oh, well, we're just making it easier for people who've been disadvantaged to get by or succeed. Just making life a little easier for them. You're absolutely right, Kevin. Kevin Graves here says it's a gateway term. Yes, in many ways it is. Oh, we just want to make things easier for people. We just want to be more equal by giving special treatment. I focus on that for far too long, though. Let's move on here. Collect data, I did that one there. And the rest of it is just a timeline. The committee should present its findings and recommendations to the House no later than 240 calendar days, so like 8 months. Provided that in its report, the government should, and the committee will, provided that in its report, the committee should make recommendations that the government may use to better reflect. The weasel words here are fucking annoying. This beyond all things irritates me is the number of weasel words. If you're going to say something, you're going to ask something to be done, just come out and fucking ask for it. The conclusions have already been come to. This isn't a major, it's not a major question of where they're going. I suppose I should clarify my position on this. My overall, the over under on it all. The long and short, the skinny, the Reader's Digest version. Just say it. Okay, Kevin, okay. I'll stop waffling on. My opinion is that Motion M103 is a piece of shit. Nothing more, nothing less. As in being a piece of shit, it stinks. And that in being shit, it has no use to anyone anymore except to be flushed. This is not a bill. This is one of the things that I keep saying and I will keep mentioning, and from that comes 2 positions. If it's true, to all of these outlets that are saying, "Oh, you don't have to worry about it. It's no big deal because it's not a bill. It's not becoming law." Yeah, that's fine and all. That's fine. But it does give the government a mandate upon which to move forward. That is the concerning part. If it's not important, then they've wasted my money to do it. If it is important, then I have something to complain about there. I just want to complain. I think I calculated this. I have a script and I'm trying to do something so much more detailed on this, and I keep getting sidetracked. I keep losing where I am in my head. I keep losing my mind. I keep losing my fucking mind over this. But there's one of 2 things. One, the motion has no direct effect on Canadians or Canada, and was therefore a waste of over $6,500 for every hour the Canadian Parliament spent tabling or debating or voting on it, based on the $167,400 base salary paid to each MP. Yeah, we pay them over a $167,000 every year, on top of them getting allowances and shit. Oh, and a pension. Or two, there is weight to the motion in that its text calls upon the House of Commons to do certain things, and that in agreement with the motion, the House of Commons has now made an agreement to do that which is listed in the motion. Folks, I give it about another 2 or 3 months until, I don't know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be some ultra right-wing individual like another Alexandra Bissonnette going out and committing another hate crime, another massacre. Or maybe it'll be the backlash from this London attack. Or maybe it'll be something that Trump says. Who the fuck knows? Over the next 2 to 3 months, I expect to see some sort of bill being tabled to specifically advantage Muslims in Canada under Section 15.2, because as you remember, though they say in this motion they want to follow the enshrined rights and freedoms as laid out by the Charter, the Charter specifically allows for the unequal treatment of Canadians, so long as they're protecting or advantaging a protected class, somebody lower than you on the progressive stack. I guess there's not a whole lot more that I can really say about it, other than the fact that yes, it does lay the foundations for bills and other parliamentary actions to come in the come up in the recent future, in the nearby future. It does put in black and white the fact that there are certain MPs in my government who feel that there's apparently a need to change how Canadians think, to tell us that what we're thinking is wrong, to condemn the dislike of a religion that, when followed strictly, makes no allotment for an existence within a secular society. And that only strives to leave itself as the ruling force of any country or region which it comes to. Islam is not a faith that has undergone a reformation. It is not a faith that includes a way for the followers of the faith to be honest in living a secular life and obeying secular authorities. But Viper, I know plenty of Muslims who are really nice people, and they're like moderate Muslims, and they haven't killed or stoned or anybody, They haven't done all these things. No, they probably haven't. However, they would probably recognize, if you asked them behind closed doors, the fact that the moderate Muslim way would lead to them being executed by those who are following the faith strictly. There's a term that I've heard before called cafeteria Catholics. Those who pick and choose what they would like to take from, the Old and New Testaments. Same as you would pick and choose what you want off the trays in the cafeteria line. I don't really have a name for the Muslim version of that, so I guess that's what moderate Muslims are. They're just cafeteria Catholics of a different religion. But it's the fact that in Catholicism, these cafeteria Catholics aren't executed, aren't stoned to death, aren't flung from rooftops. I think Seitan Atheist is another Canadian, if I'm not mistaken, and he of course has his flinging a faggot off a roof video, which is fucking hilarious. But I don't know. But I guess I can wrap all this up, this hour of ranting, with a statement to my MP. To MP Neil Ellis of Bay of Quinte. Neil, I've spoken with you before. We had our little correspondence prior to your election. Hell, I even voted for you. You were the one candidate who found the time to reply to my concerns and whose answer I didn't find entirely unpalatable. I couldn't officially abstain from voting, so I picked somebody. And you were the parliamentarian that I could find that had the closest views to my own. I respect you as an individual. Look at these talking points in this issue of bullshit. Ignore the jihad in the room. Look, Winnipeg, nothing to see here. It's like you want to attack Parliament in this nation, not in YouTube memory. Yeah, no, oh, wait. Yeah, Michael Zehath-Bibeau, who shot up the tomb of the unknown soldier, killing a Canadian serviceman, and went on to attack Parliament. Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, I know. Anyway. Neil, I should say I respected you as a person. I don't respect you as an MP. I think that the very fact that you were willing, I don't care if it's party solidarity. There comes a time where the excuse, I was just following orders, doesn't cut it anymore. And Neil, you crossed that line when you decided to vote in favor of a motion that refused to define its terms. Neil, and every other MP, this is not a complicated issue. It's not. It's black and white. Hashtag racism. It's black and white. It should be your opinion that either a motion that's tabled defines its terms clearly, especially if the Canadian people demand that the terms be defined so that they know what's being voted on. Either you support the request for the definitions or you vote nay. If somebody is not willing to tell you what they mean by something and then just say, just trust me, just trust me. You turn around and tell them, no, you're going to define what you mean by these key points, or I'm not going to vote in favor of it. It's not going to pass. Because you have, even if you're just, let's just say it's not malice, it's thoughtlessness. Let's go to the Hanlon's razor option here. Never attribute to malice that which you could attribute to stupidity or thoughtlessness, one of the two. And say you just didn't know. You just didn't know what it all meant. So you just figured out what the hell, pass it through. Didn't care to think about it. Well, if you didn't care to think about it, if you didn't care to figure out what it was that you were voting for, Neil, then I dare say that you're not worth much as an MP to me. That my vote was miscast. That my vote, my ballot, my little slip of paper would have been better used to wipe my own ass than to vote for you. Because you do not care enough about Canadians, especially your constituents, to demand some basic accountability and transparency from the party that you serve. I get it, Neil. You're a liberal. I'm probably more of a conservative. So we're just not going to see eye to eye on this one. But I don't think you are so mind-numbingly idiotic that you can't understand how important it is to know what you are voting for with the power and weight that comes with being an elected official at the federal scale. Folks, you will definitely hear me being much more vocal against things like this in the near future. I will be following this study over the next 8 months whenever the information is released by it. Released by the Canadian Heritage Committee? Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. I'll be following that. And when that information comes out, I will bring it to you as quick as I can. I'm sorry that my video production has slacked off here. I've been doing finals week, and as I said, I've been racking my brain trying to put this into a succinct video, and it can't be done. There's so many issues here to be examined. You have to look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You have to look at Petition E411. You have to look at this motion. You have to look at there was a motion. And if anyone watching this can find this, please help me out. There was a parliamentary motion that was passed on October 6th, 2016 that was also apparently an anti-Islamophobia motion, but that I can't find any record of. And I've been skimming around the parl.gc.ca sites, and I've been trying to find it, and I can't. And that's probably just on me. But if you're out there, folks, and you're listening, October 26th, 2016. Anti-Islamophobia motion. If you can just get me the suffix, like motion M whatever, I will do my best. Until then, everyone, have a good one. Have a, actually, I should probably put in that. I'll put a link to the PDF to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in my description as well. Put that there. Yeah, half of them are eating around their fucking cell phones. Yeah. Yeah, our parliamentarians don't do a whole lot. Maybe I'll run. How's that, YouTube? Maybe I'll run for office in the next federal election as an independent. I'll just run on the basis of, okay, I will campaign for definitions, and I'll campaign for some common fucking sense. I gotta find somewhere, like, I gotta find a city where YouTube's hella popular. See if I can shitlord my way into office. I think that'd be hilarious. But there are a couple of things I've said and whatnot that'd probably get me, thrown out of the House of Commons. Hell, though, if I got elected as a federal MP, give me a reason to get a carry permit. Hard as hell to get one here. Gotta have like a security license and need it for a job and shit. We can play capture the flag. I swear to God. Anyway, folks, you have a great night. Kevin, yourself as well, and whoever my other viewer is, my other silent viewer. Thank you for tuning in. I know this has been a shit show. But folks, we gotta do something. Can't just sit by quietly on it. And oh yeah, if I ever get a response back from Neil Ellis on my my 3-page handwritten letter in pen, no typos, that took for fucking ever, I'll let y'all know what he says. I specifically asked him, I specifically requested that he not vote in favor. I would have been just as happy if he had abstained. But no, he voted in favor of this. So, oh, and if you'd like to know, if you're a Canadian and you would like to know if your MP voted for or against the motion, the fourth one there, parl.gc.ca/house chamber business/chamber vote detail. Click on that link, and that'll bring you to your comprehensive list on who voted what. Yay, nay, or parried, which I think is just abstained, to be honest. And that'll let you know. And then you can decide whether or not you would like to write an email to that individual. And the fun thing is here, you can go right where it says Member of Parliament on the left-hand side, click on their name and click on MP profile. And that will take you directly to their page, which will then have their Hill office and their constituency office and all of their contact info. That's all you got to get. All you need to do is just track them down there and send all the letters you want, send all the emails you want. Just bombard them with shit. Anyway, folks, this has been JT Viper. Yes, Kevin, it's not about legally owning one, it's the being able to carry one. I'll tell another story. Actually, I will run a live stream on this, and I've done one in the past, I believe. I've mentioned it at the very least in my videos in the past, but there was an incident that I was involved in where my school was locked down in regards to a gunman on campus. So I'm going to run that right after this because I'm kind of in the mood to just chat this shit out. So folks, new stream in about 5 minutes, just a change in topics. And I'll be right back. Thank you all, and if you don't catch the next stream, have a good night.